For years, German soldiers had been told a story carefully crafted by Nazi propaganda, repeated by officers, shouted in speeches, and written into every newspaper they ever saw. America, they were told, was weak, soft, disorganized. A nation of decadent cowboys, incapable of fighting a real war. A country where industry was slow, people were lazy, and society was falling apart. Hitler himself mocked the United States as a place where the strength to fight simply does not exist. But all of that shattered the moment the German POW transport ships approached the American coastline. The fog began to lift, and what emerged looked less like a country and more like an industrial continent. As the prisoners crowded along the rails, gripping the cold metal bars, they stared in stunned silence. Towering cranes, shipyards larger than anything in Europe, steel bridges, massive dry docks, and rows of Liberty ships lined up like an assembly line on the ocean. Smoke clouds billowed from factories that ran day and night. Trains thundered across the horizon, their horns echoing like a declaration of American power. One German sergeant, a veteran of North Africa, whispered as he stared at the endless skyline, "Mein Gott, Germany told us nothing." Another soldier muttered under his breath, This is impossible. How can one country build so much?" They had been captured in Tunisia, Sicily, Normandy, or the Rhineland, exhausted, underfed, and fighting with equipment repaired 100 times. Many of them had never seen a factory that hadn't been bombed. They imagined America to be the same, scarred by war, short on supplies, stretched thin. But what they saw instead was a country untouched, a country surging with wealth and energy, a country preparing not to survive the war, but to dominate it. As U.S. Navy sailors herded the POWs off the ship, the Germans' eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. The smokestacks, the cranes, the rows of newly built ships, the army trucks rolling non-stop, the freight trains hauling crates as far as the eye could see. Everything moved. Everything worked. Everything seemed infinite. When the prisoners reached the docks, the shock only deepened. Fresh trucks, brand new, waited in lines. Forklifts zipped between warehouses. American workers, men and women both, marched out of factories during shift change, dressed in clean overalls, laughing, talking, living normal lives. Even in wartime, America didn't look desperate. It looked alive. It looked wealthy. It looked unstoppable. A young German corporal stared at a shipyard where 5 Liberty ships were being built at once and whispered, "We fight with scraps. They fight with an ocean." Another POW, older and more experienced, simply shook his head. This war was decided before we fired a single shot. For the first time since the war began, the truth hit them with full force. America was not the weak, confused, fragile nation they had been told to imagine. It was the most powerful industrial force on Earth. And as German POWs were marched toward waiting trains, their boots clicking against the concrete, they understood a terrifying reality. They had never truly been fighting an army. They had been fighting an entire continent, a continent of steel, oil, coal, factories, and people who believed they would win. The Reich had lied to them. Their commanders had lied to them. Their newspapers had lied to them. America was nothing like what they had imagined, and the war was already lost.
When the war finally ended and the time came for German POWs to return home, there was no cheering, no excitement, no triumphant song. They stood silently beside the trains and ships, staring one last time at the country that had transformed everything they thought they knew. America had not broken them with brutality or starvation. It had broken them with truth, a truth no Nazi officer ever dared to speak aloud. As they boarded the vessels that would take them back across the Atlantic, The POWs felt a strange mixture of relief, sadness, and fear. Relief that the war was over. Sadness to leave behind the farms, the kindness, the order, the food, the laughter of American children waving flags as work crews passed. And fear, deep, cold fear of what waited for them at home. The moment they stepped off the ships in Europe, the shock hit them harder than anything they had seen in America. Germany was gone. Cities they once called home were piles of ash and twisted steel. Bridges lay collapsed into rivers. Train stations they remembered were now craters. Families starved. Orphaned children wandered streets. Every familiar landmark was shattered by war. Every street haunted by the sound of absence. The Reich that had promised victory had delivered nothing but ruin. Many POWs felt guilt, not for fighting, but for believing the lies that fueled the war. Lies about American weakness, lies about German superiority, lies about the world they never truly knew. Some returned home and told the truth. America is not what we were told. America is powerful. America is wealthy. America is free. And America treated us better than our own leaders. Others stayed silent, afraid of being judged as traitors. But none could forget what they had seen. They had lived inside a system built on fear and control. Then, they had lived inside a system built on confidence and abundance. They had been raised to believe Germany was the pinnacle of human civilization. Then they saw a country with more strength than they ever imagined. They had been told Americans were chaotic and weak. Then they saw a society so stable that even prisoners could walk freely among civilians. They had been told American industry was sloppy. Then they saw factories that could build a ship faster than Germany could repair a tank. And as the years passed, many former POWs admitted something privately, sometimes to their children, sometimes to historians, sometimes only in diaries. The war was lost before we arrived in America, but we understood why we lost only after we saw America. For some, that realization was painful. For others, it was liberating. But for all, it was unforgettable. Because in the end, the story of German POWs in the United States is not simply a story of captivity. It is the story of a moment when thousands of soldiers realized that everything they had been taught was wrong. A moment when propaganda shattered in the face of reality. A moment when an enemy became human. And a moment when the truth became impossible to ignore. America was nothing like they imagined. It was stronger, freer, kinder, and utterly unstoppable. And that moment changed them forever.